Hello everyone. The video today is about the difference between Lyme symptoms and mold symptoms. Just before jumping into the video, if you don't mind taking a quick second to please like, share, subscribe, and or post a quick comment on the video, I'd really appreciate it. So thanks in advance for taking a second to do that. And also, as per usual, nothing I'm saying in the video should be construed as medical advice. This is for informational purposes only, and if you need medical advice, please talk to your healthcare provider to get that advice. So someone posted messaged me a question actually on Instagram. I don't get many Instagram messages with questions, so it was a novel way to get a question. It's mostly YouTube video comments that most of the questions come through. So nice to get a question from on Instagram for a change. So somebody messaged me a question basically saying, what are the differences between, or what's the difference between Lyme symptoms versus mold symptoms? So thank you for the question. So I've mentioned on a few videos before, and I generally mention on my podcast episodes as well, that I have a course that I put together. It's called the Overcoming Chronic Illness course, and if you sign up for my newsletter, which you can do in the link below or in my link tree if you're watching this on Instagram, then you get complimentary access to the first two modules of that course. The reason I mentioned the course, aside from just a shameless plug for the course, is that in that course I have a few slides where I kind of basically go over the essentially mirror image symptom lists between different causal agents or causal factors that lead to people feeling unwell. So what I am ultimately trying to say, using less jargon here, is that if you look at the list of all the symptoms that can be caused by mold toxicity, and you look at all of the symptoms that can be caused by chronic Lyme, aka persistent borreliosis, as well as all the co-infections, viral infections, heavy metal toxicity, certain other things, the list of symptoms is exactly the same. There's fatigue on there, there's neurological symptoms on there, there's chronic pain on there, there is potentially different neurological symptoms like twitches or random shooting pains or spasms or things like that. It can potentially present with insomnia, can present with temperature dysregulations, like getting hot flashes or sweats or feeling cold all the time. The list of symptoms that there's other symptoms as well, but the symptoms that can be caused by all these different causal factors, that they can be exactly the same. There are certain symptoms that are more common in some infections or in some conditions than others. So for example, it would be somewhat more common, albeit not mandatory, to have more, say, sinus issues with mold. Or if a patient comes in saying, I have all these symptoms, I've got chronic headaches that I feel on my forehead and in my face, it's like, well, I'm thinking mold's a little bit more higher on the suspect list because there's something potentially growing in those sinuses that's causing these types of symptoms. Or there's certain symptoms that are very commonly associated with Lyme itself, like Borrelia itself, or with mold, this internal vibration sensation that some people get, where they kind of feel like this internal tremor inside their body, but it can't be seen by anyone. It's not like visibly detectable. They're not visibly shaking. Nothing abnormal comes up on an MRI or anything like that, but they can feel this internal tremor that happens on a regular basis. There's certain, with say Bartonellosis, relatively common co-infection of Lyme, it will more commonly present with, say, cervical lymph node swelling, or these sort of longitudinal streaks or striations, as they call them, on the torso. So like there's certain little tells like that that can come up, but if you lined up 100 patients with mold toxicity and 100 patients with persistent borreliosis / chronic Lyme, a lot of those patients, I would say the vast majority of them, would have indistinguishable symptoms from one group to the other. So there's unfortunately a lot of overlap. And I say unfortunately because it makes it really tough as a patient to know what the heck is going on with me. It makes it really tough for clinicians to know what the heck is going on with my patient. And where unfortunately this sort of overlap of symptoms can lead to a lot of folks not getting the proper testing or treatment that they need, because they might go to see someone and say, oh, like, you have classic Lyme disease. They get tested. Oh, you don't have Lyme. I guess it just must be all in your head because we don't know what's causing it. Or another person might, be specialized in mold toxicity, and so you go to see them. Oh, we tested you for mold, or we treated you for mold and got your host remediated. You're not better. Okay, we don't really know what's wrong with you. Go somewhere else. So because of that overlap, it can be really tricky, and sometimes folks can get kind of pigeonholed into like, oh, you have these symptoms, it must be this. Oh, the testing and treatment didn't work, or the testing didn't show it up, or it didn't come up on the testing, or the treatment didn't work. Well, then it must not be this. And again, it's all in your head, or we just don't know what to do to help you. So there's a lot of overlap. So it's a good question. It should have a straightforward answer of like, these are the symptoms of Lyme, these are the symptoms of mold, but the elaborate answer is there's a lot of overlap between them, and it's very hard to distinguish them clinically. It's not to say that there aren't any clues. Like, it's not like a patient comes in with a list of all the symptoms that I mentioned, and I'm just like, well, just spin the roulette wheel and let's see what comes up, or let's just randomly start testing things. There are things about a patient's history that can give us clues as to what might be going on. In a lot of cases, it's more than one thing. In a lot of cases, it's Lyme and mold together, maybe with some other causal factors too. But if a patient said, I started developing these chronic sinus issues, and then that kind of gave way to a bunch of other symptoms, that would be a clue that maybe it's a mold related thing. Or if a patient said, I was working or living in this water damaged building, and then I started getting sick, then that would of course be a big clue that maybe mold is the big causal factor. Or of course, if a person said, I went on a hiking trip and got a crazy rash and developed all these symptoms, that would be a really big clue that it was possibly Lyme. So there certainly can be parts of a patient's history that point us in the right direction, and also there is a certain kind of like feel or a certain cadence to different types of patient cases. So when clinicians like myself and others have seen literally thousands of patients with complex chronic illness, when a new patient comes in and they say, this is what's been happening with me, we can kind of get a feel for like, well, this patient has more of like, this case has more of a mold feel to it, or more of a Lyme or co-infection feel to it, or more of a heavy metal feel to it, or whatnot. So there can be some little tells, and it's not quite as esoteric as like, oh, it's just clinician intuition, but there are just certain like little patterns that can give us some good insight into which direction to go. But as I said, in many cases, patients have more than one of the above issue. It's not just mold, not just Lyme, so we have to work up multiple things. But even in those cases, knowing where to start is something that, with enough practice, clinicians can figure out where to go, or what the best first steps are, what the best first steps likely are. So I hope that gave you some useful information. Again, apologies on behalf of this topic that it's not more straightforward, and that it's not just a really obvious straightforward answer, but that there is a lot of overlap. I guess the one thing I should mention as well, which is maybe goes without saying, but just testing can help to figure out where to go as well. So it's not just about clinician experience and intuition and the history. It's also, well, if a patient has all these symptoms, like, well, is it mold? Is it Lyme? Well, hopefully there's the luxury of being able to run some objective testing and like, oh, your Lyme test came back negative. And I don't just mean like a standard Western blot and that's it, but maybe getting into more elaborate testing for Lyme or co-infections. That came back negative, but the mycotoxin test came back positive. Well, it's more likely a mold thing than an infection thing at that point. So thankfully, we do have testing to help us differentiate that too, since the symptoms are not terribly differentiating in and of themselves. So again, thank you for the question. I hope that this was useful. If anybody has any questions or comments on this topic, please feel free to post in the comment section below. Otherwise, I will post another video as soon as I'm able to.